Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. NAJ fed up of non-payment for work done at vaccination blitz sites. Jamaica Agricultural Society warns of possible food price increase. And later in sports, National Senior Championships into day 2 at the National Stadium. I'm Giovanni Dennis and here are the details. The Nurses Association of Jamaica, NAJ, says some of its public health nurses who worked at the vaccination blitz sites in March and April have still not been paid. NAJ President Patsy Edwards-Henry says they continue to get the runaround from the Ministry of Health and they are fed up. Shamela Pullen reports.
Public health nurses have been stretched in recent times, working at vaccination centers added to their workload. Some worked well into the night, doubling up, having worked their regular shifts in the days. But President of the Nurses Association of Jamaica, NAJ, Patsy Edwards-Henry says some of our nurses who worked on March 27, April 3 and April 9 to 13 are yet to be paid.
A number of nurses who have worked at the blitz sites have not been paid. Number of nurses in the Southeast Regional Health Authority and a number of nurses in the Southern Regional Health Authority have not been paid. We understand that there were some glitches with the Southern region and the forms came in late, but we're not understanding why, since the last outcry, persons have not been paid.
Mrs. Edwards-Henry says the association has been making inquiries about the payment delays, but the NAJ keeps getting the runaround.
So the ministry says it's the region and the region says it's the ministry. And then when I go to the ministry, I hear I need to talk to the region. And when I talk to the region, I hear I need to talk to the ministry. And some persons just don't answer their phones after a while.
And with more vaccination blitzes on the horizon, the NAJ president says nurses are demotivated.
And as a result of that, the Southern region had challenges getting persons to work for the second blitz. So it's probably, the fact that we were out of vaccines probably is a blessing in disguise. I just believe that if you are asked to work and you are offered some form of payment and you enter into that contract, then it should be honored. It should be honored at any cost. And I just believe that the government needs to find a way to honor its obligation to the nurses.
Shamela Pullen, TVJ News.
Still on COVID-19, 68 new positive cases of COVID-19 were recorded on Thursday. This pushed the total number of confirmed cases to 49,909. The positivity rate is now 7.5%. 2 deaths were recorded over the last 24 hours, bringing the tally to 1,049. Both deaths are from St. Thomas. 118 persons remain in hospital. 10 are critically ill. There are currently 19,039 active cases. Now, when contacted regarding the non-payment to nurses, Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton noted that the ministry will be meeting with regional health authorities starting today in Ocho Rios, St. Anne. The delay in payments for the nurses and other health personnel will be discussed. Meanwhile, the Nurses Association of Jamaica, NAJ President, has also weighed in on the relaxed COVID measures outlined by Prime Minister Andrew Holness earlier this week. Mrs. Edwards-Henry says while she is wary of the move, she is also of the view that restrictions and curfews are not the answers in controlling the spread of COVID-19.
The answer is for the population to ensure that they obey and stand by the policies and protocols put in place. So even when we had the restrictions in place, a lot of persons were still not obeying and standing by the restrictions. And as a result of that, we had challenges. So number one, we, the population, the populace needs to understand that it is important to abide by the disaster risk protocols.
With sections of the country experiencing dry spells, President of the Jamaica Agricultural Society, Lenworth Fulton, has hinted at a possible increase in food prices. The news comes as Jamaicans are already faced with an increase in the price of certain products, such as flour and flour-based products.
If the drought comes on and if the fuel continue to rise, it will trigger a price increase. Because, you know, these are input costs. And if the dollar is not stabilized, you know, most of the input supplies, the fertilizer, the agrochemicals, the equipment, and other machineries, they are all imported. So you cannot say no against an impending price increase.
Mr. Fulton also noted that a price increase could also be triggered for meats such as pork and chicken. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. On a lighter note, this afternoon we hear the story of a woman constable who made no hesitation to assist an elderly man who was having challenges getting to the COVID vaccination center recently. Codian Barrett reports.
A woman constable to the rescue. This video shows the constable carrying a man, an unfamiliar sight, but the story behind the video is a reminder to everyone to be helpful. Woman Constable Tora Lawrence, attached to the St. Anne Police Division, was assigned to work at the Bahia Principe Hotel in the parish for the vaccination blitz last Saturday. While doing patrols, she observed an elderly man at the main entrance of the hotel who was not looking well.
So I approached him and I asked him if he was okay. And the lady that was with him said to me that he couldn't go any further. As she said that, he started leaning forward, so I held on to him and I asked him, "Do you trust me?" He said yes, and then I asked him a second time and he said yes. I then asked him, "Do you trust me enough to carry you?" And he looked at me and he said yes.
She then began carrying him towards the hotel when another Good Samaritan saw and offered some assistance.
Whilst walking with him for about a minute, a gentleman said, "Oh my God, I have to record this." So he started recording and then he said to me, "Are you okay?" So I shook my head and I said, "No." The gentleman that I was carrying, he said that he was being squeezed, but that was due to the accoutrements on my belt, like the baton and so forth. So the gentleman stopped recording after a while and he assisted. He said, "Let me come." And I said, "Okay." So I gave him to the gentleman.
Constable Lawrence explained that the decision was an easy one to make.
For me, it was a simple thing because I've had the experience with my grandmother. And my grandmother, I grew up with my grandmother and my granddad, and my grandmother was crippled. So I grew up knowing her to be crippled, and I've had the experience of having to take her to the doctor on several occasions where I had to lift her. So for me, it was just it's an extension of that.
She has been in the force for just under 2 years. Head of the St. Anne Police Division, Superintendent Dwight Powell, has since commended the young constable, especially given the tremendous pressure police officers were under during the vaccination blitz.
It is really gratifying to hear and to see the amount of support that she has come into for this and for what it means for the entire JCF. So I extend commendation to her on behalf of the entire Police High Command and the people of Jamaica.
Codian Barrett, TVJ News.
And chairman of the St. James Municipal Corporation is blasting opposition leader Mark Golding for comments he made during a tour in the parish last week. Mr. Golding criticized water distribution and challenges at the Harbour Street Craft Market among issues being neglected by the corporation. But the corporation head now says none of that is true. Herman Green reports.
During a tour of Salt Spring in St. James last week, opposition leader Mark Golding criticized the St. James Municipal Corporation, accusing them of neglecting that community as well as other groups across the parish. Residents in sections of Salt Spring complained of a lack of water. The former councillor for the Salt Spring Division, Sylvan Reed, was one of 2 PNP councillors removed from their posts after missing 3 consecutive meetings without notice. Mr. Golding insisted both issues have culminated in misrepresentation for the people.
The money that is allocated to the division is not being spent because the councillor is not there and cannot have access to it. And the people are suffering. Right. Poor governance. And I really wish that this could be remedied and remedied soon. They need their councillor and they need their water.
But Chairman of the St. James Municipal Corporation, Leroy Williams, has fired back. He insists that Mr. Reed's removal was a result of his own doing and water distribution is ongoing.
This is not true. Water was trucked to Salt Spring. It might not be in the quantity needed, but I can assure you that this was done. The Superintendent of Roads and Works and the Mayor are responsible for servicing the Salt Spring Division, and I can tell you that it is being served.
There were also criticisms from the opposition leader that craft vendors' challenges were being ignored. However, Mayor Williams says at least 3 meetings were held with vendors over the past 6 months. He says the ripple effect of fewer visitors to the craft market due to the pandemic led to vendors not paying their bills and the corporation operating at a deficit.
Notwithstanding the deficit, the municipal corporation granted the craft vendors a 100% waiver on their rent payment on April, May, and June. And in 2020, 50% waiver from July 2020 to June 2021. So when the Leader of Opposition, Mr. Golding, states that the vendors are being strangled economically through rigidities, when the realities they are facing are not being taken into account, he is being very disingenuous.
The chairman says the decision to cut back the opening hours of the craft market was also implemented to cut costs for both sides. Herman Green, TVJ News.